Fruits challenges. Social debate. Do fruit challenges need to be a Burundian social debate? Let's first assess some of those challenges. Case study. People are now running away from their home cities, leaving behind their home due to the flood of Lake Tanganyika, as well as the floods of several rivers which end in the Lake Tanganyika. This shows that water is controlling the way we have to live, not the opposite.
Tanganyika badutwaye ibibanza ego yuka beach yose Tanganyika kwa penzo kwashishwe ego
Science policy interfaces are defined as social processes which encompass relations between scientists and other actors in the policy process, and which allow for exchanges, for evaluation, and joint construction of knowledge with the aim of enriching decision making. Policy decisions that are informed by science are critically important in building a foundation for a sustainable future. For example, understanding our changing climate and its impacts on everything from public health and safety to economic security can lead to ways to mitigate and adapt to the effects. Several factors have been recognized as enablers of successful science policy interfaces, including the establishment of clear objectives, the appropriate inclusion of stakeholders, and sufficient resources. Let's listen to experts, voters about science policy interface.
Hello everyone. Welcome to this recorded interview. Today we will be meeting again our experts about reporting that you might remember in week 2 of the first part of the training when we talked about the water, the food, and the climate. Hello, Marco, how are you?
Yeah, good morning. I'm fine, Diana. And I'm happy to be back again talking about the things that we like.
Yes, indeed. Today actually we'll be talking about a different topic, a very different topic from climate and food and water, but we probably mention these topics again. We'll be addressing something called the science and policy interface. You will last for around this is for less than half an hour, and we will be discussing the science policy interface. So, if you don't mind, I want to ask you first, what do we mean by the science policy interface, and why is this an important topic that you chose to discuss with us in this interview?
Policy interface is very important because the government faces complex issues, and if there is a lack of knowledge of the policymakers, they cannot make good policies. So science is important, but the language of science, the language of scientists, is different from the language of the policymakers. So you need to have a place where they meet together, and that is the science policy interface. And if you do a proper job, you have the best policies that will have the greatest impact on the society and the environment and the economy, the people, the planet, and the profit. And maybe to help a little bit the thinking, it would be good to just to touch upon this COVID pandemic that we have now, and that the governments have an urgent need of doing all kinds of policies and implementing all kinds of measures. But I remember that 10 years ago there was a Dutch virologist, and he said, people, please, we know that there will be a corona again, because the SARS and the MERS, they all were coronaviruses. There will be a coronavirus again. We need to prepare, and the scientists reached out to the policymakers. Policymakers didn't hear it. And one of the problems was that it would cost, and the development of new vaccines would cost 13 million euros. And if you now see how much money is being spent on all of this, it is really ridiculous that 10 years ago, scientists had not had the possibility to develop this new vaccine. So if there would have been an active science policy interface, we would have solved or we would have tackled the crisis much more easy.
Yeah, indeed. That's a very good example. Let's talk now about the water field, because the training is about water, obviously. So do you have in mind some examples of practices where we can really see how this interface was done and we can understand better its importance?
Yes, I have two examples in mind. There are more, but I chose two examples to discuss today with the people that we have in the session. One example is the drought in the Netherlands, and another example is how the water dialogue between Egypt and the Netherlands was structured. Okay, for the drought system in the Netherlands, in 1976 there was a big drought in Holland, a once in 200-year drought, and there was big damage, and the country had no idea what to do, because they were just it came by surprise. But that gave rise to a dialogue between scientists and policymakers. And what we have today is a whole drought management system based on this science policy interface. And there is a system in Holland now, an annual system with agreed actions upon a certain situation. So the drought monitoring system starts in Holland the 1st of April, and depending on what is observed by the scientists, certain steps will be implemented. This has all been discussed already before. The policy is ready because it was discussed previously. So if we can talk about it for ages, but if the discharge of the water of the River Rhine entering in Holland is below a certain threshold, then the whole system of monitoring starts, and also the policymakers say, okay, now we start Plan B, now we start Plan 3, now we start Plan 4, and so on. That is the first one. And of course it started in 1976, and with every drought it's being updated and evaluated. But it is an annual thing. It is not something, a one-off that you have a problem, you solve it, and then that's it. No. It is a continued science policy interface that has helped the Netherlands a lot in dealing with drought. And every drought we learn stuff, and every drought we improve it, we build infrastructure, or we make another policy, or we put another instrument somewhere to measure. But that's basically it.
Another question about that. So how often do public exchange happen, like between scientists and policymakers? Is it, for example, in the Netherlands, is it like standardized, or is there certain rules or processes that are in place for that? Or is it outcome, for example, like how does it go?
Now, in the Netherlands, we have a national commission on water management that is actually looking into drought. So it is a commission with people from the policy point and people from the science point, and they don't meet if there is no drought. Like nowadays, we have rainfall enough, and some people claim that there's too much rainfall, but we should always be happy with rainfall. But basically, if there is nothing to discuss, then we don't discuss. But the whole procedure to act upon, if there is an urgency, that is there.
Okay. All right. And you said you want to say another example from Egypt?
Yeah. The example of Egypt is also, I think, very nice. And I could talk about it a lot, but basically, we had a system in Egypt where there was an advisory panel. And high officials from the Egyptian side and high officials from the Dutch side They met annually.
Okay.
And if the Minister of Egypt, Water Resources and Irrigation, wanted to have something discussed, an issue, he put it on the table, and then both sides looked at it through the secretariat, of which I was part in those days. And we were actually, as a secretariat, we were the interface where the questions from the minister and the scientific answers were linked. And we found for certain problems, because you don't have an answer like this on all the problems. So if there was a problem put on the table by the minister, then we would have workshops, we would have working groups, we would have consultant measures, we would have sometimes a university study or so, all kinds of tools to come to an answer. And then the digested science was put on the table of the policymakers again, and then the policymakers could say, we don't do this. Oh no, that's a very good one. See, so the policymakers were given the digested science to act upon, and that was actually working very good, because this whole cooperation it solved many technical problems. It gave policy advice. The fact that we did give policy advice, it also saved cost, and it developed human resources, because if you have people in Egypt and in Holland working on joint problems, it builds the capacity of the people. So then the people are also much more linked, scientists and engineers are much more linked to the real problems of the country. So part of the benefit was that the real problems that was keeping the ministers awake at night, were at the table of the scientists and the engineers also to find a solution.
Yeah, that's a nice example, because usually you see scientists from a country working directly with scientists from another country, or policymakers with policymakers. But in this case, it was nice to see a mix of scientists from a country working with politicians from another country. So that's also a very nice way of cooperation and to exchange knowledge and experience between them. So,
and also, that's what you say is absolutely right. It also gave trust. Because if an Egyptian minister is advised by his people, that's okay, and he has his people and he's happy with his advice. But if a policymaker from other countries said, we did it like this, and why don't you do it like this, it gives more trust. I mean, you don't change the people, but it just gives more trust in making decisions. So, and this trust actually can only build if you have a continued system. If you meet only once a year, and every time you meet other people, you don't get trust. I mean, Diana and you and I, we work together, we trust each other. And first time I met you, and first time you met me, there was no trust because we didn't know each other. So part of this, if you have an annual system, or at least a repetitive system, and you know each other, there is also the development of trust, and then it becomes more like a think tank. That you are free to share your mind and free to share your ideas.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what we mean by this interface, to understand benefits, we've seen some example how to use it, looks all positive and nice, but in reality, in practice, there must be some challenges or some issues with applying this interface, or even with initiating it, right? So what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, challenges. We always face challenges. The main challenge in this SPI is that the language of the policymakers and the language of the scientists is different. So what needs to be done is, that's the challenge you have to face, is that the policymakers should say, put the questions in a way that a scientist can answer them. And a scientist should do his research and by answering the questions of the politician, because, to be honest, the idea that the politician has of a scientist is that, okay, there is a scientist. I gave him money, he does his science, and then after 3 years he comes back with a report, nice report, but it doesn't answer my question, and he wants to do another research. That is not what the policymaker wants. So the challenge is they speak different languages, and related to this is also that the policymaker, he wants a quick answer. The whole policymaker cannot wait 2 years. The Minister of Health who has to make a policy for vaccination, he cannot wait 1 year. He needs it today or at least tomorrow, at least at the end of the week, but not later. So that is another. And then the challenge also is to find the right form of science policy interface, because there are different ways how you can shape this, form this science policy interface. We saw this, the panel in the Egyptian water situation. With the drought, we have another, in Holland, we have another system. So maybe in a ministry there should be a kind of science unit, and in the science entity organization there should be a policy unit, so that the people learn to speak their own languages. And the form to choose for a science policy interface, that's a challenge. It's doable, but it is a challenge. And then let me suggest that we listen to a seasoned science policy guy, or as he calls himself, knowledge broker, someone who is a broker between knowledge and science.
Yeah, let's do that.
I think the greatest challenge is truly making that link and having the two communities communicate on a regular basis. It means that the policymaker has to ask researchable questions. They can't say, give me everything you've got about climate change by 3 o'clock. A knowledge broker can help frame that question. Give me everything you've got on how a meter rise in sea level might affect Marseille. That's a question that somebody could answer rather than giving a mass of information. Research actually has to be used. It's no good if it's locked up in a paper. A peer-reviewed paper is sometimes what the measure of an academic career or academic output is. I've done so many peer-reviewed papers and I've produced so many students. Well, how does that research actually translate into actionable policy? What impact has your research had over time? So I think that what I see for the academic community, there's always going to be a role for pure research. Please don't get me wrong. But I think that I've seen in universities now that there's a great deal more call for applied research. And I think that seeing more and more applied research coming out of the academic community that is tailored to the policymakers is very important.
Yeah. Interesting. So there's a focus here on actually translating this research into outcomes that are reflected on the policy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But you can ask me what about civil society? Huh?
Yeah, like indeed, because the aim of every policy is to help citizens, develop communities, right? So what is the role of citizens and of civil society in this interface? How can they maybe be included, or what can they say?
They should be included. I mean, we talk about the science policy interface because that is what we talk about, but in the interface itself, in the dialogue, you need to include civil society. That's what happened in Holland with the drought management system. The farmers had a big say because they want water in a dry summer, and also in our, I didn't give that as an example, but in our European drought work, civil society was also represented in the discussion that we had. So the design of the mechanism in the science policy interface is very important, because science and policy alone is not enough. You need also to convince the people that they have to accept it, and for that you need awareness. And then, because the people will buy the policy if they see that it is for their benefit. You're absolutely right. They are a part. We didn't talk about that, but they should be in the interface. Yes.
I think all stakeholders, maybe also private sector, everyone.
Exactly, but that depends what you talk about and in which context. So it is not one size fits all. If you do this, then you are getting it. You have to really see what happens. And if there is no problem, there is also no need for a science policy interface. The government needs to have a problem that they want to solve, because then then there's the political will, and then there's also the funding to do something about it, and then they will take the voices of the people and the voices of the scientists very seriously.
Yeah, and also it's a time process that requires money and time, so indeed it should be one plan that used for something good. Okay, so maybe we talk later about this topic when we host you online, then also participants can ask a question. But for now, I'd like to end maybe with a set of recommendations or some lessons learned that you want to share with us when it comes to the policy side. What can we do if we want to do it? How can we start it?
It's kind of a recap of what we discussed. Scientists need to adapt their science to the needs of the policymakers. The applied research. Of course, you need fundamental research into nanotechnology and what have you. That's fine, but there should be applied scientists to help the policymakers. And the policymakers need to say, we heard it before, but it's good to repeat, need to say what they really want. There should be a problem to solve. And then the mechanism to be developed for this science policy interface is very important. So the 3 points we discussed, but those are the 3 main recommendations that I would like to make. For the conditions, there should be political will. There should be a problem, because if you want to solve an issue, you want to have a dialogue on a non-problem, it doesn't work. There should be a really problem. And then you also have the political will and the financial resources to do it. So,
and maybe while initiating this process doesn't exist in a certain context, it's important to take into account expectation management. So, what will result from this process? What will result from this conversation? What can scientists offer to policymakers? What do policymakers want from scientists? Because in every usually conversation, it's important to manage the expectation of the others. So why this process happens, right?
And we could discuss this with the participants. If there is a problem in their country, how would I think of together with them, how would I think of designing a science policy interface? Because then you can, and then if there is a participant who has a certain problem, then we can see, okay, who is affected by this problem? What is the cause of the problem? Can it be solved? Should we work around it, etc., etc.?
Okay.
It is not a one size fits all. You have to do it very specifically.
Indeed. Okay, so we'll further talk about this in the online section. For now, I want to thank you for giving us this insight. I will share also some reading to the participants so they can know more about the topic. And we will talk soon about it. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, it was nice to talk to you, and I'm looking forward to meeting the people again on their specific issues on this.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Water mismanagement in Burundi context is not a matter of lack of human resources, lack of organization, lack of money, even if financial assistance is lacking. It is all about valuing the role of water within our community. So, for our second objective, we need to address the value of water project economic viability, social equity in terms of improved water household services, and environmental protection. We really do have an interest in making water management, good land use, and climate change adaptation a social debate. Think about the role assigning to the participants. Social debate subjects we need to begin with for better water awareness and good land use, and this is for our first objective, intent-based philosophy behavior, informal insurance, relationship-based community. As a conclusion, Interplan Knowledge Program Foundation members need to shift their paradigm and think in solution mode. Hopefully very soon, new Interplan Knowledge Program Foundation members, to mean those committed to sustainability, will start to sensitize your neighbors, brothers and sisters, even your parents too, to shift their paradigm as water end users, beneficiaries, local administrative entities, engineers, technicians, being committed to sustainability in order to empower and take charge of themselves. This is for the promotion of the building of better world. Everyone is aware that we have too many civil engineers and architects but still don't think in solution mode. Challenges are there within our household, but don't move on and fix them. We should do our best where we live, plan and publish to awaken those in charge of project accountability. So yes, we really do have an interest in making water management, good land use and climate change adaptation our social debate. Thank you for watching.